Avengers! Assemble. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Excelsior, the world's #1 Marvel's Avengers podcast. This is your episode for March 20th, 2021, a new era. My name is Christian Buckley. I'll be your director today. Joining me is the Apex legend, Jack Martin.
Excelsior, Christian. We truly are in a new era. We got a lot to talk about for the future of this game. But been doing my MCU rewatch. I caught up to Thor Ragnarok last night.
Ooh, okay.
And let me tell you, Phase 3, untouchable compared to Phase 1 and 2. Not even close. Just clear, in a way, the best phase of the MCU.
Yeah, you've definitely lapped me. Within the past week, I put it on pause because it was like, it's Snyder week. You know, I do like DC as well. So I was like, okay, I'll do a little bit of a rewatch here from a movie time. And then, of course, I have to chunk out 4 hours. So
Yeah.
The movies this week have not been Marvel, but I'll be back to it probably starting this weekend. So good to hear.
I want to talk to you about that at some point. I don't know if that's on this show or wherever that may be, but I do want to hear your thoughts about that.
What, the Snyder Cut?
Oh, yeah. Big time.
I'm down to do like maybe not an Excelsior thing, but just a discussion on Joy Clicks. I'm absolutely down to do that.
Sure.
That'd be fun. And I am wearing a Superman shirt today, but we are in a new era for Marvel's Avengers. We will, of course, be going over everything that we gained through this week's updates for the game, including the information we received at Square Enix Presents, which paint 2021 as potentially a comeback year for this year game. So, before we get to any of that, of course, we'll dive into Fury's report. What's new this week for you to play in Marvel's Avengers? First up, if you want to grind out your heroes, your low power level is Mayhem over Manhattan. Your high power level is Agony and the Anthill, which again, old missions returning. The Harm Room Challenge will net you Hawkeye #1 from 2012, the iconic cover for Matt Fraction's beginning of the run. Love that.
Yeah, a lot of Matt Fraction love in this Hawkeye run.
Oh yeah. And the marketplace, it's kind of Hawkeye Central, you know.
Big time.
But there was that. There's a free Kamala skin as well. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, it's like a black top with sort of gold accents, and she has like red pants on, red eye mask and scarf. So pretty cool.
Yeah, I absolutely claimed that. The Hawkeye stuff specifically is the Ronin skin that you get for level 40 on the challenge card. They have that in the shop, and it has a purple colorway to it. And if you want Old Man Clint, I'm kind of surprised that you can't earn that, and I didn't think it was in the challenge card. Maybe it's involved with the story, but Old Man Clint is in the shop as well.
I'm really upset about this, actually.
Really?
Because, yeah, so not in the way that I don't like Old Man Clint. I actually really love the design. I think it's cool. And you've played a little bit, so I think you're at the point where you play as him at like the very beginning.
Yes.
So it annoys me that you're given the chance as the player to interact with that skin, essentially, and then the game takes it away from you and makes you pay $10 for it, essentially. I don't like that. I don't think that's cool.
Is there like a possibility where, because I didn't look at the colorway for the marketplace version, but is there a chance that, because I forget if you could do this with Kate, but is there a chance that you're given like an iconic quest line or something post game for Hawkeye, and then through doing that you'll unlock Old Man Clint? Is that a possibility? I don't know how far into the post game you are.
I have done like the iconic quest lines and all that.
Okay.
I've pretty much 100%ed Future Imperfect at this point. It's not very long. And yeah, Old Man Hawkeye is not available anywhere. He's not on the challenge card. I'm pretty sure that's the only way you can get him, which is a huge bummer because it's essentially the game giving you something and then taking it away and making you pay for it. That doesn't sit well with me personally.
Yeah, that's definitely strange because like I think from the trailers they try to convey that, hey, Old Man Clint and modern day Hawkeye even in the context of the story, kind of exist as two different characters in a way. But like, I'm definitely with you. It's weird that you get to play as them, and then it's like, hey, you want to keep doing that? Cha-ching.
Yeah, it's a little gross in my opinion. Maybe sometime down the line there will be like an earnable version of that, but I don't know. It that struck me as very odd after that happened,
Yeah,
and I wish I got more screenshots in.
more than anything, it's just surprising. I think because I
Yeah.
truly expected that would be something that you just unlock, but turns out no. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask you this: did you choose to unlock Clint's challenge card?
Yeah, baby.
Nice.
First thing I did, because you pop in and you're like in the wasteland immediately, and I'm like pause, challenge card, unlock, and that's the first thing I did. So yeah, been
Very nice.
grinding away at that a little bit.
Very nice. I have yet to pop that challenge card, but I believe I will because I did the opening mission. We will get to impressions on the next gen version and Hawkeye after we get through the announcements for the week. But yeah, I'm gonna invest. I'm gonna go in on it. I think. But before we get to any of the opinions about things, I think we have to lean into our Stark Reality segment and look at this week as with a big macro lens on like, hey, what's going on with this game this year? So, Square Enix Presents happened Thursday, same day as all of this released. I watched it with Kevin. You were watching it as well. You were on top of everything. Uh, Square Enix showcased Avengers probably a little over halfway through the presentation, and it was about an 8 minute chunk. I think half of those 8 minutes were dedicated to again showing Future Imperfect.
I'll tell you what, Christian, I was real scared
Yep.
about halfway through that presentation,
Yep.
and I'm sure you were too, because it was it was our greatest fear. When last week we were talking about what would make us upset is if they only showed off Hawkeye, and for a decent chunk of it, it was just Hawkeye gameplay, and I was like, please don't do this to me. Please don't do this to me.
Yeah.
But they fixed it. They fixed it.
And I think the unfortunate thing also on top of that already being a blow to the hype was also like it's a bunch of stuff we've seen constantly, right? It's like we've
Mm-hmm.
seen the Wastelands, we've seen Maestro. But thankfully that was not all they had in store for us because Jack, we finally have a roadmap. It feels good.
This caught me so off guard.
Yeah.
Where they put up the roadmap graphic, kept it on screen for a few seconds, and I was like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. I
Yeah.
did not. We were anticipating Black Panther, which is of course what we got, but I did not expect to see a roadmap. That was like a pie in the sky thing for this game, because that's just not something that the devs have really talked about. But yeah, I was very surprised and very. This is very welcome.
Yeah, I'm super glad we have this. If I've seen people being like nitpicky about it, of like, why didn't you show the full one of the thing? Why was it only like 3 seconds of the presentation? Which, like, I understand that feeling, but like, hey, we still have this. This is incredible that we got this, I think.
Yeah, I think if this was a war table, they would have been like they would have gone through column by column and
Yes.
described everything that was happening. But yeah, of course, this was for all of Square Enix, so they used that time to as effectively as they could, and we have the graphic that we'll dive into, so we can talk about that a lot more.
Yeah, so they didn't go column by column, but that's exactly what we're going to do right now. So,
That's it.
there is an asterisk ahead of all of this stuff. In the bottom left hand corner, they say the roadmap may change and does not include all in progress work. I think. Do you want to
Wow,
start?
that is very. That's like a transparent. I'm looking at that right now. You could barely see that. That's
Yeah.
funny.
Do you want to start with, I guess, the notable absence from this, Jack, in terms of what we know is supposed to be hitting this year that's not here and fills in that void?
Yes. Sorry, Spider fans, true believers. Looks like we're not getting Spider-Man anytime soon. Or if we do, it's at the very, very end of the year. Because IGN was speaking with Crystal Dynamics' Scott Amos, who I believe is the director of this game, and was asking them about Spider-Man, because Spider-Man was supposed to be around this time. Obviously, everything has shifted, so that has shifted as well. And basically, Scott Amos was saying it's still being worked on. It's going to happen. It's coming to PlayStation, but it's not going to come before Black Panther. We don't have a release date on Black Panther. My mind is thinking what you were probably thinking, maybe September at this point, maybe in the winter. So Spider-Man is a probably winter 2021 slash early spring 2022 release.
Interesting, because I didn't do a ton of research. I didn't read the IGN article, but what I did see earlier was I saw, I think Nibelian on Twitter tweeted out that they confirmed, and I don't know how recent this quote is or how up to date it is, but they confirmed that Spider-Man would not be hitting before summer. So I don't know if that's a more specific window than anything else.
Yeah. IGN article says, here, let me read that right now. Blah, 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 blah. Ads. He won't be coming to the game before summer 2021 at the earliest.
Okay.
The headline also reads, but not coming before Black Panther. So that's kind of confusing in a way, because it's not coming before summer, but it's also not coming before Black Panther, and Black Panther doesn't have a date. So
yeah, it's
I'm
strange. And we also know that there's a couple other things they've kicked around before, but they do have additional content listed at the bottom. But why don't we dive into the seasonal breakdowns? Because March,
sure.
We have the next-gen console update and Hawkeye Future Imperfect, which we will be touching on impressions right after we go through this roadmap. So we don't have to talk about that right now if you don't want to. Spring, presumably April. We can slap some months on this. Tell me if I'm off base here, but I believe this is likely maybe April.
Yeah, that I think you're right on that.
Tachyon Anomaly. It's described as play as any combination of your favorite heroes. Tachyon missions scaled for power levels 1 to 100. What is this, Jack?
So this, and the graphic shows with Tachyon Anomaly, shows 4 Iron Men flying together. So essentially this means that you can play as any, like what it says, you can play as any combination of the characters. So if you and I want to roll in to a match with our friends Kevin and Omar, and you and I both want to play as Captain America, that's fine. And let's say they both want to play as Black Widow, that's fine. You can have any combination of whatever hero, essentially.
Yeah, which is very exciting. That's a thing that people have asked for since pre-launch, And I think that might help them, because I know we speculated, and a lot of the community did, that maybe similar to Smash Bros, they'd introduce the idea of like an Echo character that isn't too different from one another. And I think because we have the 2 Hawkeyes, people speculated this as well. Hey, if you can't both be Iron Man, then we'll add War Machine. And as we know from Miller, apparently, that War Machine's kind of bumped down to last priority right now. So I think contextualizing a mode, or not even a mode, maybe just like, do you think this is exclusively to one mission type, or do you think that this is just going to be an event that's like, hey, canonically, this is possible now?
So my thinking is that I'm always going to bring it back to this game, Apex Legends. They always bring new events, just as mostly like a fun, new, fresh thing for players to jump into, but also as like a test bed to see what works and what doesn't. And to me, this struck me as, yes, this is a fun event where you can just kind of play as whoever you want with your friends, but also this is probably a way of them testing out any of the kinks involved with this, where if like come May that has been so successful and there aren't too many issues involved with it, I could totally see that being, hey, this is just standard from now on, where if you want to jump into like a villain sector with 4 Iron Men, go for it. I think that is part of this. I hope it sticks around. I hope it's not just a limited thing. So I do think this might be a test for the future.
Yeah, I think you're probably correct. Also, Tachyon missions are specified here. I don't know if that's specifically what they're talking about in terms of this structure of like, hey, if you want to do this, you have to play a Tachyon mission. I think it's separate. I'm with you that I think it could just be a thing of like, hey, any mode you can do this in as a limited time event. If it works out, we'll make it stick. But the other update for spring, presumably May, is the Red Room Takeover, which is described as enter the Red Room with new themed Harm Room content, including new hero outfits. So, uh, if Tachyon is April, I think it makes sense that the Red Room, which is Black Widow's origin, uh, is releasing in May to sort of get some synergy with the Black Widow movie, like a lot of people thought this game should be doing out the gate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that to me yesterday when they were announcing this, and yeah, that seems very smart and very spot on. You're always trying to incorporate a lot of things when in terms of marketing, so I think that would be a really good idea. Where, hey, you're gonna go see Black Panther or Black Widow? No, you're actually not. It's not gonna come out in May. But if you if you are gonna see that, jump into Marvel's Avengers, and you can still get your fix of Black Widow in that game. So yeah, I think that's a really great idea. Do you want to talk about the potential new hero outfits that they announced?
Yes, so they say new hero outfits for the Red Room Takeover thing. That is listed separately from another tab on this roadmap where they detail additional content and features. So I don't know if these are implied to be two separate things, but the Red Room Takeover listing new hero outfits has been sort of, aligned with a lot of reporting. And I know Paul Tassi basically said, they told me this. Uh, Outfits inspired by the Marvel Cinematic Universe will be releasing in conjunction with Red Room Takeover. So because of like the synergy with the movie, like it just makes sense that this is when the MCU tie-ins begin in May.
Yeah, and begin I think is the correct terminology to use for this because I don't think we get an entire MCU dump in May. I think we probably get the Black Widow suit from the movie and maybe like a couple phase 1-ish suits here and there. And then slowly like there'll be like drips and drabs after that for further MCU content. So yeah, that's exciting. I want to see what these things look like on my heroes.
Yeah, I don't know what path I'd prefer them to take. I think could be cool if maybe we get. Ooh, okay. The OG6 are in the game now for the
Mm-hmm.
MCU OG6. Um, if we get maybe their Avengers 1 outfits and that's the shop, that could be cool. And then by the fall, who's left? We have Black Panther, Kate Bishop, and Kamala Khan, who at that point will all have had interpretations of them at the MCU. So because the Ms. Marvel show comes out this fall, as is Hawkeye, which sees Haley Steinfeld, Kate Bishop. So maybe do a release around then for their MCU skins, and then just keep this one dedicated to the Phase One, Avengers One, or iconic looks for the OG6.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We were talking about how they'll release these, whether it's an earned skin or a paid skin. Do you want to talk about that a little bit while we're here?
Sure, yeah. I saw on the subreddit there was an excerpt from one of the outlets reporting on the MCU skins, and the way they phrased it was there's something planned for the release of the Black Widow movie in May, a Red Room challenge which will also mark the arrival of actual MCU skins in the game. So the way it's phrased of a Red Room challenge, which will mark the arrival of actual skins from the MCU, gave me the idea of like, are they earnable through whatever this event is? But I don't know if that would be the avenue they take because there is so much potential to monetize those MCU skins. I could see it go either way, honestly. What do you think?
Um, my thinking of reading that was those skins just happen to be coming out around the same time as
Mm-hmm.
the Red Room takeover. Um, Mostly, I feel like they will be purchasable, um, just because they are like optional skins, and these are a way to bring people back in and to make money off of them. So I think most of them will probably be purchasable, but maybe a few of them will be earnable in some way. Like
Mm-hmm.
earnable through an event, like with the Red Room Takeover, for example. Maybe you complete whatever challenge that is, and you get the Black Widow movie skin, for example.
Yeah,
I think that could be a great way of doing that.
yeah, I think that might be the avenue to take there. It makes sense, and then if there really is a differential between new hero outfits under this pillar and also in the bottom of the roadmap saying outfits coming from the MCU, like that seems the right way to do it. Maybe we're reading into it too much, but that's exciting. That's a lot sooner than I expected MCU skins to hit the game.
Yeah, totally.
So, going forward for summer and beyond, we have three specific pieces of content. The first one is titled Cosmic Cube. It is a new villain sector where we face off against the Scientist Supreme, Monica Rappaccini. And it also allows you to, or it's defined as confront the unchecked power of the Cosmic Cube, which we have not really seen yet, I don't think.
Yes. So the Cosmic Cube is the Space Stone, right?
In the movies, that's what they called the Tesseract. I think
Mm-hmm.
at first, like early Phase One, they called it a cosmic cube. Maybe Red Skull called it that, but yeah, that definitely caught my eye before I had the description of what it was. I was like, "Are we like building up Infinity War? Or what's going on?"
Yeah, it seems like it. It seems like it. Um, this is interesting. I don't know what that fight against Monica will look like. Um, I think for me, this is probably the least interesting one because I
Hmm.
don't really know what it even. I don't even know what that looks like. Obviously, a new villain sector, um, but that's really all we know about that. So I can't really think of it too much in my
Yeah,
head.
well, what I'll say is that I think it's exciting that this is evidence of what they said earlier, where they're like, "Hey, we could just drop villain sectors whenever." They haven't done that yet, but this is that. It's not tied to a character release, so
Yeah, sure,
uh, new, like you said, new villain sectors are welcome.
totally.
Um, Also for summer and beyond, we have Wasteland Patrol, another new mission type that has been requested pretty frequently by the community. It is described as a new Warzone mission type patrol mode, new war zones and assignments within the Wasteland region. Now, Jack, are you familiar with the idea of a patrol mission type? Because Destiny's had this for a very long time.
I heard people talking about this,
Hmm.
so let me try to explain it, and then you can correct me because
Okay.
I'm probably wrong. Um, the way I picture patrols and the way I've heard them described, essentially you drop into a region. Let's say you drop into like the Utah Badlands, and there's no discernible like mission structure. You kind of just walk around, and then sometimes things will pop up like, oh, look, go rescue those two prisoners. Oh, go defuse these bombs or whatever. And you can like pick up chests and stuff along the way. Is that essentially what it is?
Pretty much, yeah. That's exactly what a patrol zone is, and I think it's interesting that it's specifically just the wasteland. But
Mm.
I have some pretty positive feelings about the wasteland from the little I've seen of it so far. So I think if you're going to do a patrol zone, then introducing it here is probably a good idea.
I agree. Because at least after you get through the whole Hawkeye stuff, there aren't too many missions centered around there. So it'll be nice to have like new content or at least a new way to interact with that
Hmm.
um, a few months out. So that's cool.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning as well that there's nothing to say that patrols can't come to the other war zones eventually, because they just have to be configured that way. If this is the most recent one and they saw all that, the clamoring for this type of structure, then maybe they've been working on configuring the wasteland to be that for a while. So we don't know, but I think it's not a mind-blowing addition to the game. I don't really spend a ton of time doing patrols in Destiny, but it's a nice time killer, in a game that I like playing, so it's a good addition, I
Yeah.
think.
And before we even get to the big thing that we're going to talk about, I think I agree with you about pretty much everything we've already discussed. Like, these aren't big game changing events, but it is nice knowing that we do get like these little additions,
Hmm.
um, like here and there to tide us over till the big stuff. Obviously, we really haven't gotten any quote unquote big stuff yet. But it's nice knowing that this game is being worked on and developed and changed and updated. So even though all the stuff we just talked about isn't huge, it is nice that we do get some small stuff here and there.
Yeah, and I think it's a case of these small things adding up, like
Sure.
between being able to play as multiple characters, between the harm rooms getting another varied version of them, a new villain sector, and a new mission type in one area that could lead to them being in all areas, like that's pretty good, I would say, in terms of just bolstering what's already there in the game and making it more engaging. So, everything, like you said, not game changing, but good signs, I think, and makes me hopeful. So, finally, on the roadmap, the final pillar for summer and beyond, we have War for Wakanda expansion.
Expansion.
Expansion. So
I
settle
like that
in.
word for this.
Yeah, settle in. We got a lot here. New hero, Black Panther. New hero outfits, which I want to get to in a second. Power level cap increased from 150 to 160. New villains, including Claw. New Claw faction enemies. New story. New Wakandan jungle biome. New outpost. Now, why don't we just hit bullet point by bullet point on this one? Because there's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff for each one of these, I think.
Let's
First
do it.
up, new hero, Black Panther. Christopher Judge, we got to hear him. Looks great. What do you think of this?
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. He looks incredible. His outfit looks different than the leaked outfit that's been going around,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of happy about that because I think this one looks super sleek. In a lot, in my opinion, I think it looks a lot cleaner than the sort of like knight in shining armor outfit that he had in like the leaked photo that I'm sure everyone who's listening to this has seen.
Yes.
So this is in more in line with the MCU take on it, but it is still a little different that its own. It's obviously the own Marvel's Avengers take on it. So yeah, it looks pretty great.
Yeah, and I love the introduction too. We got like a nice, probably like 40-second introduction video it was CG, I think, but probably rendered in game. But it showed the reveal of his suit. I think he said like Avengers on me or something like that, and it showed the city of Wakanda in the background. Lots of jungles. There were some like ruins in the jungle. You could see the Panther statues. I thought it was a well done introduction trailer for a character reveal, personally.
Totally. I think we were expecting this in like at the end of Hawkeye. Well, yes, in September.
Yes.
But also at the end of Hawkeye's War Table blog, and I think I understand why they held it off.
Agreed. So a good introduction as well. I'm co-signing all the things you said about the look, and it's going to be great having all of his skins. I'm sure there's going to be the classic like Black Panther with the cape skin in the past because that's such a cool look.
Hell yeah, give me anything with a cape.
Oh yeah. New hero outfits is the next bullet point, Jack.
Yeah, tell me what you're thinking, because you got something stewing up in that brain of yours.
Yeah, so we know it's not explicitly said, but we know Wakanda is bringing a raid, right?
Yeah.
Remember when we were talking a couple weeks back about making rewards in this game better and how Destiny has its raid armor sets? And I suggested maybe we get an exclusive skin tied into Wakanda with vibranium for all of these characters if we complete the raid. I think we might get Wakanda vibranium skins for all of these characters if we beat the raid here.
That's interesting. Because that's like how when you beat the Avengers initiative or whatever it's called, the campaign for Avengers, you get the Stark Tech outfit.
Yeah.
For each character. So yeah, I think you might be onto something. That could be interesting.
Please, because dude, there'd be like a super sick, sleek vibranium like Thor outfit and a really cool one for Black Widow and Iron Man for sure. Like,
yeah, definitely.
Some nice like black, silver, and gold for everybody. I know that was like one of the pre-order skins, but make them cooler. Like,
Ooh, imagine that startup screen where everyone's like in uniform.
yeah, dude. Because
Hell
I
yeah,
feel like really that could incentivize replaying the raid. Like if you run the raid as Thor, you'll get Thor's vibranium skin, you know?
totally. Yeah,
So
I think that's an amazing idea.
I truly hope that's what those new outfits are about. If it's just like, hey, we did them and you can buy them, that's fine. But I think making it like tied to the raid, it would be incredibly rewarding, and I'd absolutely replay the raid if that was the case.
Totally. I do in general hope that there are more ways to get skins rather than just through challenge cards or like the fabrication machine
Hmm.
or just buying them. So if you could earn them by playing content like the raid,
Hmm.
that's a great idea. So I'm game for that.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, Power level cap increase. I think this is also tied into the raid because there's really no level 150 content. We can get to the additional content later, which is most likely going to be 150 content. But uh, with a raid, you want to have people play the content that's associated with it before they go into the raid. So getting that power grind 10 more levels to 160 to prep for the raid, I think is reasonable. Destiny does that with every expansion as well. So you're gonna have to grind 10 more levels probably before you can tackle this raid.
Sure.
New villains, including Claw. Thoughts on that?
Mm. So yeah, we get Claw. Ulysses Claw, right? I think Kevin
Yes.
was asking. Okay. Ulysses Claw from the MCU was played by Smeagol,
Hmm.
aka Andy Serkis. Um, so I like Killmonger maybe comes to mind when if we're at a war for Wakanda, right? You would imagine that there are other Wakandan villains out and about. Of course, I'm really only familiar with the Black Panther movie,
Hmm.
and I think Killmonger is one of the more notable Black Panther villains. So he comes to mind. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think Killmonger would be. You'd have a lot of hype for it, right? I know this game is sort of proud of its history so far, introducing things that haven't been done in the MCU fully. Like we haven't seen Kamala yet, we haven't seen Maestro. So maybe I could see them introduce some characters that we haven't heard of. I I wonder if you might be able to do like a villain sector with Craven the Hunter and then tie that into Spider-Man if that's coming after.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah. I don't know, but I think villains is obviously intentional, but that's on there for a reason. But yeah, probably new villain sectors, so that's exciting.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we've seen like with Kate and with Clint new villains, but they haven't been integrated like post uh, DLC campaigns for them. Like we
Mhm.
don't have new villain sectors for them. I think maybe we do with Clint now with Maestro. I haven't checked that out, but with Kate, we still don't even have the super adaptoid fight, right? So
Yeah,
hopefully everything is ironed out to that point where we do have like I don't know 4 to 5 new villains that we can just mess around with.
yeah, that would be ideal. But you know what else is going to be very refreshing? New claw faction enemies. No more
Thank
aimbots.
thank God. I want to just be beating people up. You
I
know what
know,
I'm saying?
I know.
I don't want to beat these robots up. I want to see Cap throw a shield at some dude's head.
Exactly, dude. Because the thing is, we're clearly gonna build to Ultron at some point. I can't keep fighting robots until Ultron shows up, right? Like that's gonna be so boring.
Clear the palette. Let's just cycle. Honestly, if they were like, I know this will probably be exclusive to like the Wakandan biome, but if
Mhm.
they were like, hey, this is a game wide event, all the villains you'll be facing will just be replaced by like humanoid villains or something else like that.
Mhm.
Um, that would be cool. I assume it'll probably be exclusive to the Wakandan biome, but even still, to play the expansion of War of Wakanda and hopefully, like what they've been saying, play against and defeat new villain or new enemies, that has me excited.
Definitely, because I think the fact that there is so many bullet points here and what you just said leading into the fact that the other three bullet points are there's a new story, a new biome, and a new outpost, like expansion is the right phrasing here. Now, I don't want our expectations to get too high, but like it's we've speculated that like, hey, maybe the right idea is to push Black Panther, have a huge moment for this game with tons of content, the most you've dropped so far since launch. Uh, when do you think that hits? Because I don't like my gut tells me September or like after year one, but if it was initially supposed to be December and they're just trying to bolster the offering, I could maybe see August or maybe July. I don't know. What do you think?
So, at the very earliest, like what this graphic says, this is summer, right?
Hmm.
So, this is not a May thing like we were hoping. Obviously, not April or anything like that. So, it is at least summer. Now, realistically, I think I agree with you. I think it's probably September for the year one drop. Because I think that's a great way of being like, hey, this is the start of something new, High School Musical.
Hmm.
And I think that's a great way of just being like, we have War for Wakanda out, and maybe they announce some more stuff. Like, this is what you can look forward to in year two. This is the start of it right now.
Hmm.
So I think that'd be a really great idea. And also, like, they're holding off Spider-Man right now for after Black Panther, so I could totally see Black Panther releases and then, like, a month later or whatever it ends up being like, hey, this is the next thing leading up to it. So I think they're holding that off to entice people to keep checking out the game. So yeah, I have a feeling this is probably a fall release, right? Because it does say summer and beyond. So I imagine that's a little bit past this summer.
Sure, yeah. Like, I want to put my faith in August, and I do think that you're right that they're going to drop Spider Man within a month after because at that point they'll be ready, I feel like, to do these consistent character drops. Because we've seen, especially with this, that they're slowly weaning away from like making the game what it should have been at launch, right? Like, there's less of those updates and huge focuses. So yeah, ideally with War for Wakanda, that can be a new milestone in this game's legacy, right? The way that Taken King kind of was that moment for Destiny. Like, coming around year one, I think makes sense. I'd love it to be August, but I think September for this and maybe October for Spider Man makes a lot of sense. So,
Sure. And I've seen, like what you said, I've seen a lot of comparisons to the Taken King with Destiny,
mm-hmm.
and I've seen like a lot of like refutations of comparisons to Anthem because a year after Anthem there was practically nothing,
Yeah,
and
this is
the fact that we have all of this content that's coming out is like instantly more stuff than what had come out for Anthem. So this is already in a better position, seemingly, than Anthem was.
yeah, for sure. And we'll get to what we personally feel about this after we wrap up here. But it's worth noting that on the roadmap, they also detailed their ongoing improvements, which they are continuing to, fix on a week to week basis. Balance tuning, gear and progression, collectible comic system, and matchmaking, which, of course, matchmaking being the main reason that we don't have cloning lab or anything else that's been promised yet.
Right. And they do say that Omega level threat missions, which I believe is the cloning lab,
Mm-hmm.
are coming and are being worked on, but I think they're still in like the fine tune staging for that. Where I think Paul Tassi was talking to like Scott Amos and the people at Crystal Dynamics, and they were basically saying, we're not going to release that until it is like ready to go because we don't want to be fixing more things. We want like actual good content that is ready to go to be released. So they're holding that until it is like 100% ironed out and just ready to be played.
Definitely. I got through about like half of his video before we recorded today, Paul Tassi's that is, and he also mentioned that in terms of gear and progression, that uh, Crystal has talked about. I guess this is similar to Diablo, where there's an added level associated to your character that allows you to have that XP you're earning. That, like, how you're locked at level 50, but you can still earn levels.
Sure.
Have that XP be worth something, either to buff the stats that you have, your core four, like improve those,
Mm.
or just bolster the strength of your skills, maybe you know, get your cooldowns to be a little faster or something like that. But progression on that level, the way they detail it in features, is post level 50 progression is coming as well, which is exciting, I think, for people like you and I who have. I think you and I both got that 250 levels trophy with like two characters.
Yep, I was just about to say with like Iron Man and Cap. Yep.
So how much better would it have been if you could have just made that Iron Man grind that you did to get 250 levels, like just to make him OP, you know?
Yeah, totally. I will say I got all my heroes. I didn't say that at the top of the show. Got all my heroes to level 50 before Hawkeye.
Very nice. Congratulations. I did not do that, but
Thank you. Thank you.
clearly I'll have time still.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So for the additional content though, that is also coming this year, we have the Omega level threat missions, which, like you said, is the cloning lab, is the super adaptoid fight, whatever else falls under that Omega level that they've brought up since pre-launch, and we were very confused about. Those are still coming. Multiplayer mega hives. They're coming this year, which is nice.
Yay. I'm not super excited about this, but it's nice to have.
Yeah, I mean, I'll actually play them now, if it's not all on my shoulders. Like, I think that is a very easy, and we talked about this before when they announced that they would work on this, that's such an easy fix on like having multiplayer content worth doing because it makes that easier, you know?
Yeah. And it's a way for you and I to get you that Hive trophy. So
Yes,
that actually has me excited now. We can just jump in and do that.
absolutely. So, uh, I think though that is everything that's been included on this roadmap. So, I guess before we take another step back and just look at the bigger picture of the Hawkeye expansion, Jack, how do you feel about this specific detailing, which potentially might not be all the content coming this year, but as it stands, how you feeling?
Yeah, so like what you said, this might not be everything, and we might not get everything. Like it is subject to change. I think this was them basically saying this is what we're very confident about coming out this year. So we're gonna talk about that. There could also be some other things, but these are the things to focus on. But yeah, I think in terms of this graphic and what they announced during the Square Enix Presents, it's very on Marvel's Avengers, to be completely honest, because we haven't really had the best communication from them in terms of what fans can expect going forward, given that this is a live service game. Of course, this is all taken under the fact that COVID is a thing and Crystal Dynamics was uniquely affected by the California wildfires. So they had two like natural disasters and a global pandemic, or a natural disaster and a global pandemic to deal with. So they've had a lot, but we just haven't really gotten that communication from them. But I think this is a really, really great step in the right direction. Even though most of this isn't the content to save the game, I think these are great little additions that will hopefully go a long way in getting this game back to where it needs to be.
I agree. So, with that in mind, why don't we talk about Hawkeye Future Imperfect? Because you are playing on PS5, Jack, why don't you hit me with your PS5 impressions first?
Ooh, yeah. So, I was initially worried because people were making a big old stink about transferring your PS4 save to the PS5. And let me tell you, at least from my experience, pretty easy. If you played Spider-Man Remastered on the PS5 and you transferred your PS4 save to that version of the game, pretty much the same process. You go to the PS4 version. I did this on my PS5, so I had the PS5 and the PS4 version downloaded. I went to the PS4 version, which you can switch on the PS5, loaded that up. In the initial load up screen, there's a tab on the right now where you can transfer your save and upload it to the PS5 version. You do that, you go to the PS5 version, it's there, it's working. You can delete the PS4 version. So that was pretty much a breeze. In terms of like the upgrades I noticed from the PS4 Pro version running on PS5 to the PS5 version, the thing that you'll notice the most is the load times. Like, as soon as you load up like the Avengers Initiative from the main menu, you used to get like the hero shots loading for like a minute and then you're in, right? Instantly, you hit Avengers Initiative, you're in the helicarrier or whatever area you're in. It was so surprising. And another thing I noticed was if you're going, like selecting a mission, you're in the Quinjet, you can like, you're basically like loading up that mission. And characters are talking to each other, you can skip that dialogue because it no longer needs to load, and you can just start a mission pretty much instantaneous. So, yeah, I'm still getting 60 frames. It's pretty much the same. But yeah, it's all about the load speeds, and they're incredible.
So the fact that you can skip, I'm assuming, I don't know if you've encountered this yet, but I'm betting that's going to be the same thing for elevators.
I have I encountered a few elevators in the Hawkeye mission, or in the
Hmm.
Hawkeye like quest line, at least one, and that was not skippable. At least I don't think it was.
Okay.
So I think elevators are just an integral part of the game, unfortunately.
All right. Well, that's good to know at least. So,
Yeah. I will say I did encounter some glitches. I don't know if this was the PS5 version or just the game in general. Um, when I was playing through Hawkeye, I would go into like the character menu mid mission to select a new skill, and then I would try to back out, and it would do like a freeze frame on his character in the touchpad menu for like 10 seconds. And then I would load back in, and I was like, oh, I don't like that at all. I encountered that like a few times, like a few too many times, I would say. So hopefully that is just ironed out, and maybe that was just a case by case basis, and it's not like a main thing. But it is worth noting that I did see that.
yeah, that might just be the game. I don't know because even on my end, like playing on PS4 Pro since launch, bringing up the touchpad menu for like the gear and skills and cosmetics is always sluggish. Still is.
Yeah.
So hopefully that gets fixed. But why don't we talk about Hawkeye Future Imperfect specifically? You have finished it.
Yes.
I did the prologue and his harm room tutorial. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess out the gate, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this. As somebody who has been playing pretty much every time I picked this game up since December, I've been playing as Kate. Picking up Clint, I think his melee feels like surprisingly better in a weird way. I don't know if it's just maybe his animations or if his combo is a little longer out the gate, but it just feels like there's less resistance doing his katana attacks for melee damage. I don't know if you feel the same way, if I'm uh, not just like projecting maybe, but it feels different to me.
Yeah. In terms of his kit, we can talk about like the like general story stuff and just story structure, I guess, a little bit later. But in terms of like his kit, it is, I feel, mostly similar to Kate Bishop, where you do have the sword, you do have the arrows. Obviously, you have like new arrow types. I found
Th-
myself mostly only using the first one and maybe the second one.
Yeah, they're barely different. Like his leftmost one is a normal arrow, his middle one is a three shot with like energy attached to it, and his right one is a Last of Us arc bow that like gives you a effect if you hold aim and hit square. Kate has the exact same things, just different like things. Like her middle three arrow shot doesn't have an effect, and her charge up one is a bomb. So it's like the
Yeah.
exact same basically.
The final like bomb type one on Clint's is like you shoot it and then you have to manually, like what you said, you have to manually sort of detonate it.
Mhm.
I didn't particularly like that. It's just like an added step that I don't necessarily need, and I found it pretty much impractical. So I almost never use that. But yeah, he's mostly very similar. I think the change comes in his ultimates, where his L1 is a healing area where he lays down an arrow, and then in a certain area you gain HP if you stand in it.
Mhm.
His L1 R1 is Yondu's arrow,
Yeah.
essentially. It's just an arrow that seeks out enemies, which is really cool and useful. And his R1 is Gibraltar's attack from Apex Legends, where it's like an arrows in the air and it's just firing down below. So I think his ultimates are really cool. Overall, though, I feel like I prefer Kate, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah. It's definitely very similar. I think there's some very, very subtle differences that I might be leaning towards Clint more. I only have like two skills unlocked, so I have to see what's in store for the rest of them. One of my favorite things with Kate is you can modify, I think, her attack heroic to sort of suck all the enemies around her into, like focused on the arrow.
Yeah,
What's really nice is that Clint has a similar ability, but if it's your hold square quickfire arrow attack, it just does that. So it's not wasting a heroic. And I really like that because that's a tool that I used a lot for dealing with crowds. And very early on, again, only about like an hour into this, messing around with how he plays, I really like that that's not tied to a heroic because it's very useful, I think. So
it
I
is.
do like that.
Yeah, that particular move is a little harder to use than Kate's because you can't really aim it,
Right.
and enemies have to be a lot closer to you. But yeah, it is nice to have that. Overall, I feel like my biggest issue with Hawkeye was running around open environments with him,
Mm-hmm.
because he can like use a grapple arrow to get up places, but he feels really sluggish compared to Kate, where she had her warping ability. And let's say like you're at the bottom of a building and there's like no grapple point for you to use, but you can still get up there. Um, for Clint, you have to like find a way to get there, but for Kate, you just boost up and then you're there. So I think that goes a long way of differentiating Kate enough from Clint, where I would prefer to use Kate just because of her ability to move around quicker.
Sure, yeah, and I still have a lot of exploring to do with him. I think I'm only like a level 4 right now with Clint, so I'm very early in his campaign. But um, want to talk about the Wasteland because I've only seen it in the prologue. I think it's for like every time a game is like we're doing post-apocalypse, and then they showed it so many times for this specific expansion. I got bored of seeing it, but playing there, I think it's one of the better areas in the game, personally. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, it's different. It's very different than pretty much everything we've seen. It is post-apocalyptic, but it's very like bright and vibrant oranges a lot. I found myself using photo mode pretty much more than I ever did in this game in the Wasteland, just because you get those nice shots of Clint and like the orange behind him.
Right.
Um, it's really cool, but like any other biome, it obviously like just doesn't invite exploration that much. There's not really, that's just how the game works. There's not really much to do in C beyond like the enemies that are in front of you or the mission markers that are guiding you where to go. But you're practically just running around any area that you're in the game, and that's no different with the Wasteland. But it is a visually different and visually pretty biome in the game. So yeah, I think the Wasteland is a nice little addition to this game.
Yeah, and I'll also add on that like the layout of the design here feels more not lived in, but it feels more real, I guess. You know how like some of the other environments just feel like big to make it feel big.
Mm.
Like this, there's a lot of narrow like cliff sides that you got to go through, and some when there's an open field that makes sense, and it just feels like it's much more realized as an actual location than like, hey, there's this big field that has a building at the corner of it, and then there's another big field at the other end of it, like specifically something like Siberia or wherever we are in Russia for the winter areas. Like to me, it just gave me a good sign of potentially the future or maybe what Wakanda could be just in terms of being a fully realized location.
Sure. Yeah, this is the first new biome, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think it's a good first start. Definitely.
agreed. Um, so that's really all I have based on his impressions so far, I'm positive on him, but I want to ask you because you've seen the campaign through to the end. Obviously, we don't have to dive into spoilers. We can talk more about that later, but personally, I don't really care about the spoilers. I'm doing that more for the audience. But
Okay, sure.
uh, the Maestro fight, how was that? Was that just Abomination? What is it?
Yep.
Oh
Like,
God.
well, it's different, right? He has different attacks, but you're still fighting a big green monster, right? Um,
hmm
and to me, it didn't feel different enough to be like, oh, this is a really. I need to employ new strategies for this villain. Like you do, but you also don't because you're just lobbing any attack you can possible at these things. Like that's. I feel like I would be surprised if any villain release for Marvel's Avengers has. It feels like a Deathstroke from Batman Arkham, or feels like any Arkham um, villain for that matter, because it is very much. I'm just gonna just keep spamming the attack button over and over again, and then just dodge when I can. Right? There's not too much strategy involved. But yeah, my show was fine. Honestly, it does feel like a reskinned Abomination in a way, though.
That was my biggest worry with the game, which is unfortunate to hear because I really had high hopes that Maestro would feel like you're fighting Hulk, not like you're fighting Abomination again or just like avoiding AoEs or whatever. Like, that's unfortunate, like I think if you have the idea of like, oh, you're fighting Hulk, essentially, it's like, oh, he's going to be jumping around a lot, maybe grabbing onto the walls, and you're going to have to avoid that, and like floor turns to lava basically because he's going to do some like radioactive attack. Like, I'm with you. I think the game needs more creative boss fights, and similar to, Hawkeye after Hawkeye having Abomination be one of the ones who've been playing on loop since launch, and then having slightly different Abomination is unfortunate.
Um, I'll say this about the expansion in general, or not. I shouldn't say expansion. I'll say this about like the DLC in general. Wasn't nearly as impressed with it as I was with Taking Aim for Kate.
Okay.
It felt noticeably shorter to me. I don't know if that was just me or if the DLC is in fact actually shorter, but I got through it, and the first thing I said, I was like, "Is that it?" Like, I think we went into Kate with the expectation, like, "Oh, we might be just getting like an hour, like one mission, and that's kind of it." Um, and that's like kind of like you get a few missions, obviously, with Hawkeye. It is pretty much comparable to Taking Aim, but in the grand scheme of things. But to me, it felt a little shorter, and with the story implications of Taking Aim being set up and like with the to be continued, I don't think this expansion really like does anything with that in a way that I was expecting. Um, and there's like I guess maybe now that I'm thinking about it, there is something teased for the future. But it didn't really feel like it. Like it felt like there was somewhat of a sense of urgency coming from Taking Aim to Clint with picking back up with him. But I honestly don't even know where we're gonna go next because the DLC just kind of ends. Like there's no like thread that we have to continue on in the next character update. So to me, that was a little disappointing. So yeah, it didn't hit me as much as Taking Aim did. I'll say.
Yeah, I can see that. I've heard a similar sentiment that the game's expansion, or again, not expansion, the new character and story is pretty brief, all things considered, even more so than Kate's, depending on how you approach it. Which is unfortunate. Do you like? I'm wondering because they've implemented that new level scaling. You've played this story, you've done all the new content for Clint. What level did you end up at?
Yes, so I wrote this down. I
Okay.
was level 23 when I finished. And I think I said last week, if I wasn't like fully leveled by the end of his campaign, I think that'd be a huge problem. I don't think that's the leveling's fault because the new system starts at level 25. So I wasn't even at 25 when this DLC ended. I think this was this ended up being somewhat shorter than Kate's because I believe when I was done with Kate's, I was either at level 50 or pretty much close to it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that was the old XP system. Now there's this new unnecessary one. But yeah, I think I actually have Avengers pulled up right now. I think I'm around 30 at this point, 34, and I'm power level 61 after doing some running through some like threat sectors and stuff like that with Clint.
Okay.
But yeah, I wonder what the progress to level 50 is going to look like. I might jump in a harm room and just try my best and see what comes of that.
Sure. Do you think that I know you didn't get your other characters to 150, but do you have any expectation for Clint based on your experience with the story and all of his content?
So I would have to get him to level 50 to see how the perks work, but I honestly don't think I would really use him all that much. Like I
Sure.
said, if I want a bow and arrow character, I'm probably going Kate, and I already have her at 150. So maybe like if I'm doing trophies or something and I want to mess around or like listen to podcasts and I do want to get him to 150, then I will. But yeah, I don't think he'll be that useful for me personally.
Yeah, that is a bit of a bummer. Like I'm torn, because I think last week I said with the new leveling system, it's kind of killed my hype for wanting to level Hawkeye, even though I like some of his ultimates better, despite getting Kate to 5150 and really enjoying her as well. But like, yeah, I'm sort of where you are. Like, I'll see what the rest of his skills are like. I can say for sure I'll definitely at least get him to level 50, but yeah, I do think that for what it's worth, it's nice that we have duplicates, even though that's kind of irrelevant now with the Tachyon update. But like, it really is just the circumstances around the game that just made this 6 month period kind of unfortunate that it's just the two similar characters. So
Yeah, and for me, I think they let off a little bit better with taking aim. So, like, again, with all of these updates, I don't expect all that much from them. Like, new character, new area maybe, and, like, a bit of a story, and that's pretty much it. And that's what we got, and I was kind of expecting that.
mm-hmm.
I'm a little disappointed because I thought Kate's expansion was noticeably more impactful than this one was, personally. But I think with the addition of the new biome and just the idea of having more characters in the game, I think it was good enough for me. It does not have me coming back for more and more, though, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what was expected to a certain degree, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not we weren't putting all our chips on Hawkeye.
No. We were kind of just resigned to the fact that, all right, we got Hawkeye.
Yeah, it's like sure, it's gonna have a fun time, but whatever.
Sure.
So I guess seeing what they delivered here today, seeing what we have with the Hawkeye expansion, what they're promising, maybe expectations for all the promises based on what we've gotten between the Tachyon Rifts, Clint and Kate. Like, would you say that they have a good momentum at the moment as of like yesterday with the news and the content drops?
So, yeah, the momentum is very recent because for the past couple of weeks and pretty much since the Hawkeye War Table, we were pretty bummed about the state of this game.
Yep.
Specifically, we didn't have like any idea what the future would look like past Hawkeye. And it turns out that was purposely kept from us for the Square Enix Presents, which none of us knew about, obviously. They hadn't announced it. So I think that makes up for the information we didn't get at that time. Because it felt like they just didn't want to say anything, but they purposely didn't. They couldn't say anything because they had to wait until this event. So I'm really happy with all of the news we got and the fact that Next Gen is here already. The fact that we can replay the campaign, Hawkeye's out, and we know a good idea of what's coming in the coming months. And we've heard more comments that they're committed to a years-long approach to this game. Obviously, that could be stripped away at any point from Square Enix, but at least Crystal Dynamics has faith and they want to continue past just a year one thing. It has me significantly more hopeful and significantly more faithful again in this game because we just know more now, and it seems like they're taking a different approach than what they had previously done of just don't talk about this game, just don't talk about this game until something's ready. So I'm hopeful and anticipated that they will be more communicative about future updates after this point. It seems like we've opened a new chapter for Marvel's Avengers.
I agree. I think even if we only, because that possibility was thrown out there, right? Even before the recent comments of like, hey, we're committed to this game for years. Like, I think there was a real possibility in all of our minds where it would be like, hey, Wakanda, maybe that's the final bout. And if it doesn't work, then that's the end of it. I don't believe that that's the case, but if it were and all we get is up to Wakanda from what we saw here today, I'm pretty happy with that. And like, that isn't the idea that like, hey, building up to Wakanda, if Wakanda works, then it will continue. I think that at this point, they'll still use that as a barometer to be like, hey, maybe we should reconfigure, maybe if Wakanda isn't as big as we want it to be, then we'll consider free to play. But yeah, I think everything they talked about with the game this week, including having more content to play, the next gen version, it's good momentum. And I think that having this milestone roadmap is very nice. It's welcome, and it makes me feel good about still playing this game, because I really haven't played it much over the last few weeks, aside from just having a Marvel craving. But like now, yeah, I'll get back in there and I'll finish off some of these quests I've been hanging on to for like weeks that I haven't finished yet. I'll get back in there. I'll do the entire Hawkeye quest line, because now I know that it's not me wasting time. Well, I'd still be wasting time, but it's not me wasting time for something that's gonna die within weeks. It's me, enjoying wasting my time on something that I know will eventually reward me for doing that. So having that assurance makes me very happy.
Totally. Side note, there's a weird funky thing going on where you can, when you do like the transfer saved from PS4 to PS5, the PS4 version like can't be updated from the PS5 version. So I went back in and I was like, is my Hawkeye like level 30 right now? And like he's not. So I'm thinking I'm going to test this out with one trophy. I have 2 trophies I'm sitting on because I want to platinum this thing with you.
Yes.
I might platinum the PS4 version, maybe, and then don't sync that up, and then save that PS5 platinum for like a platinum run with you. Because I think I might be able to get away with that. I'll have to test the servers, but we'll see.
Hell yeah. Also worth reiterating, I don't think we brought this up, but it's something you and I considered in a past episode. The idea that maybe they would charge for the Wakanda expansion, because all the rumors and even what they showed today, it's beefy, right? Like it seems like it's going to be a decently sized addition to this game. They have come out and said, hey, no extra charge. Wakanda is going to be free for players of the game. So
excellent. I did not see that. So that's very reassuring.
yes. So all the chips are resting on Black Panther and Wakanda. Hopefully within the next 6 months, we'll have to wait and see. Of course, we'll be covering the game until then. And absolutely, I'm excited, dude. We got MCU skins. That's a big thing. That's going to be fun.
Hell yeah. I want to see what these things look like. I'm very excited to see them on like those character models.
Yeah, because I saw people being like hung up on the word inspired. I just think that's a way to say, hey, we're putting them in, like that's what Spider-Man said. It's like, oh, MCU inspired Peter Parker outfits. It's like, okay, it's the Stark suit. They did it. They scanned that thing basically.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's a very good one-to-one comparison of, hey, we have the Scarlet Spider skin in Spider-Man PS4. That's exactly what it looks like. And even like in Marvel's Avengers, they have like the stupid one a couple weeks ago for Iron Man. That's pretty much a 1-for-1 from the comics. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
It's
like
going to be close, if not exactly the same thing.
yeah, I saw people that were like, "Is it gonna like for Iron Man? It's like, oh, it's gonna be the games model for like the face mask, but just the color scheme." Like, no, I think inspired by means that just like, hey, like you can't get the actor's likeness. I think that's more for saying like, hey, it's not gonna look like Chris Hemsworth Ragnarok Thor, but it's gonna have the Ragnarok Thor outfit, right? Like, I think
Totally.
that's covering your bases there. But
Yeah, absolutely.
speaking of the MCU, although we've had all this stuff with Marvel's Avengers this week, meanwhile, the MCU is continuing on with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. There's an extra "the" in there that I did not realize.
You thought it was Falcon and Winter Soldier?
I thought it was Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I didn't know it was the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Oh, yeah, I thought it was Falcon and the Winter Soldier, not the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Good,
Yeah,
that's a good point.
because I was ready to pitch this whole thing about how it's such a long title. We need a hashtag. I saw FATWS, Fat Dubs, because this show's going to be
Yep.
full of them. Like, I had it all lined up, and now it's T Fat Dubs. That doesn't work.
Well, you could take the T out. You could take the initial T out. You know,
Sure.
like when you're organizing something in a book in a like Blu-ray shelf or a bookshelf,
Hmm.
um, and you're organizing by title, you don't use that T.
Yeah. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, comma, the. There we go.
Yeah.
So, episode one is about 50 minutes long. It is titled New World Order. Uh,
Mm.
we won't go into spoilers immediately. Jack, overall, first impression, what did you think of this episode?
I think this is a really great opener. Um, it to me, so it has me excited to see what's next. Because I know that there's 6 episodes involved in this. So to me, that makes it seem like it's going to feel nice and concise. Obviously, we'll see by the time the finale has come through if that comes true. But overall, yeah, I think I was worried that this show was going to feel made for TV because of the focus on action. But we get a really great action set piece in this that does not feel made for TV. It feels very MCU. Um, and I was worried. I think you and I were expecting this to sort of feel very different than like the sort of experimental themes that, well, not experimental themes, but like sort of the differing themes that WandaVision was exploring. But I think this show is a lot more mature than seemingly than other MCU projects are, and that has me excited. And I think the seeds were planted very well in this first episode. So yeah, all around, I think this is a really great um, episode for the show.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, and I think I brought this up with WandaVision in one of the first couple weeks, but I kind of really like the idea of Marvel Studios continuing with just doing episodic storytelling because it mimics the comics, right? And that's what these characters were created in. And I think the idea of taking the scale, scope, and budget of MCU stuff and retaining that on a week to week basis, episodic format, I think can only help the storytelling, honestly, because I've seen a lot of people saying, "Oh, slow episode, boring. This is going to be a movie that was dragged out over 6 hours instead of, just good TV." But like, I don't think like I think what it's going for is that more drawn out learn about these characters, right? Because I think in this episode we get a better look at the character of Sam Wilson and especially the character of Bucky Barnes than we've ever had in the MCU.
Yeah, 100%. When I was finished through watching this, I was like, wow, that kind of felt like the sort of beat for beat um, story beats of like something like a Daredevil from
Sure.
but like obviously with the full MCU backing. Um, yeah, I think this is a really great exploration of both of these characters. I think you and I were both focused on Falcon leading into this, but I think both characters really get a lot of time to um, just a lot of time on the screen, and we get to learn a whole lot about them. So yeah, I think it has a really great balancing act between both Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we crack open a little more into spoiler territory? Like you said, we get a little more insight into both of them. Do you want to start with Bucky first? Because I feel like I
Sure.
have more to say about Sam.
Yeah, go for it.
So Bucky in this episode is very interesting because the way he's introduced is through a nightmare of his
Mm-hmm.
days as the Winter Soldier. And we see him, he goes into some place, he kills his target, he kills some witnesses, and then that leads into him going into therapy. And we have a really, like, I liked the scene of him talking to his therapist because I knew if that was something in the MCU that would have been like an MCU film, that scene would have been like 45 seconds. But this was like a full blown scene exploring him trying to like open up like painstakingly. And the read I kind of had on it was like, I wonder if because Bucky, non-Winter Soldier Bucky, just Bucky Barnes, James Buchanan Barnes, was born and raised in the World War II era, that he has an extra difficult time of like be opening up and dealing with his emotions just because of like how there were so many stigmas. There still are, but like back then about like men's mental health, that like I
Sure.
I thought that was really interesting for his character there.
Yeah, absolutely. You're totally right on the fact that that scene was definitely could go a little bit deeper because it was a TV show. I remember thinking like partway through, I was like, "Wow, this scene's very long." Not in a bad
Yeah.
way, but I was expecting that to be a flash in the pan. But it was a good, solid like few minutes of them discussing back and forth. What I love about about Bucky in this is that he is dealing with a tremendous sense of guilt, and it's almost like he's not deserved that guilt because he didn't necessarily he did those things, but it was obviously he was conditioned to do those things and he had no real agency over them. So I really liked them. I liked how the show explored that idea of how he feels responsible for all of these actions, where he didn't necessarily want to commit them, and he's trying to repent for these things that for him he feels like he needs to. But I guess if you're taking a look at this from a different perspective, he wouldn't necessarily we wouldn't expect someone to do that because he wasn't under control of his actions. So it's very nuanced, and I didn't anticipate the show really delving into that.
Yeah, especially if you look at the history of Bucky in the MCU, right? He's just kind of this nameless, almost voiceless character for a lot of the time, just resigned to the background in a lot of instances. But yeah, I thought Sebastian Stan really had some opportunity to really flesh the character out, and I thought he did a great job in that scene specifically, as well as when he was acting off of, I think the older man's name was Yuri.
Mm-hmm.
All of that stuff, and the moment it clicked for me in my head, where like it was before he went to his apartment, but like I think it was when he was at the bar, and like I just saw Bucky's face, and he like looked down at his drink or something. I was like, oh, he killed his son. That's why they're friends.
Yep.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
because I
Yeah,
thought
because
I was just gonna
he
say,
has that.
okay, yeah.
Oh, sorry, go for it.
I was just gonna say at first I didn't know if it was like he was just a buddy from World War II that was still alive, but I was like,
Mm,
oh, but go ahead.
yeah, because he has that checklist of people he's going through, and like it's funny because like for the Winter Soldier that would be a hit list, but for Bucky Barnes that is like these are all the people that I've affected adversely in some way, and he's trying to make amends for that.
Hmm.
And that character Yori is like very much he's like circled on the Notebook, and he just so happens to live with him too. Like I don't know if that was or live in the seemingly in the same apartment building,
I
maybe.
think so.
So maybe he like at first tried to befriend him and is like, "This is too much for me. I'm probably gonna move here." That seems like too coincidental for him to just, "Hey, my neighbor is someone on this list," so he probably is like, it probably takes a lot for him to reach out and express what happened. So uh, I think there's some really great storytelling with Bucky in any scene that he's in. And we
Yeah,
haven't even seen him with Sam yet, so I like how they are both getting their time in the spotlight separately.
I wholeheartedly agree. Another thing I wanted to throw out there as well, just tying back to like some parallels to Steve, right? Of how like he had a hard time adjusting. Like, I love how in Winter Soldier there's like when Steve meets Sam and they're talking about like what it's like being back from war. And I love that when Bucky's introduced and he wakes up, he's sleeping on the floor because it's like, oh, your bed's too soft. Remember that whole thing
Mm,
with Winter Soldier?
that's a great call.
Loved that. That was a nice little detail. But yeah, Bucky in this episode I thought was great. Probably the best Bucky's ever been, if I'm being real.
Um,
Like,
y- yeah, totally. I think he had just more time and honestly more things to do. He was pretty much relegated to a side character after Winter Soldier, especially.
mhm.
But yeah, totally. Also, when he was talking about his gloves, obviously he's trying to cover up the fact that he's missing an arm. I was immediately like, dude, Luke Skywalker with the gloves.
Yeah, good call. Man, that's good.
If only, maybe one
Yeah,
day.
one day. Well, why don't we transition then to Sam because Sam actually opens the episode and talking about a character who's been relegated to being a side character for so long. Sam Wilson has always been my favorite supporting character in the MCU. You know, on that level of like they're around, they don't really have a scene to carry, but they're always great. And here, I think out the gate, he really is able to capture that leading man energy that I think was the only main question that I had about like, you know, stepping up like with the character we've known for so long. I feel like I would have had that question with Bucky too if it was about him, like the main factor of this show, like okay, well Sebastian Stan, I don't know, like he's been in this role for so long in this side position, like what's it going to be like if he has to step up and be the guy? And out the gate immediately sold. Loved him.
Yeah, because we get the like I don't know 30 seconds or maybe like a minute of him on screen, uh, dressing up. I was like, oh, he's going to Cap's funeral.
Hmm.
That doesn't actually turn out to be that. Um, but it's he says nothing, and then we get the voiceover from Cap and him from Endgame when Cap gives him the shield, seemingly setting up what we're gonna get throughout the rest of the show of his hesitance to um, take the mantle of Captain America, where he's essentially saying it doesn't feels like it's someone else's, and Cap
Hmm.
saying it's not. Immediately that sent chills up my spine, and from him even looking at the shield and like zipping it back up in its case, uh, you get all of those emotions associated with that. And yeah, I think Anthony Mackie is going to do a fantastic job. Even from that one scene, it's like, all right, I know this dude's is going to carry it. And then immediately after, we get the action scene that is just him. It is just Falcon, and he carries it throughout.
Yeah, he really nailed everything he had to do in this episode. I think, and I really liked seeing his family, like his sister and his nephews, because again, it's similar to what we saw with Bucky of like him dealing with everything. Falcon has to sort of settle into finding his place now, you know, because I think he said he was contracting with the U.S. Air Force for missions and stuff like that, but he's really kind of aimless right now and just trying to find his place. And like, I think the idea of him going back home after he was missing for so long, and obviously him and his sister have sort of a uneasy past with the decisions he made in regard to leaving the family. Um, I think him settling there and like trying to find a place with his family is interesting the way that Bucky's trying to find a place in modern day. So I do like that angle a lot.
Yeah, and I think we knew going into this that Kevin Feige was essentially saying like we're gonna explore like his background. Like we don't know pretty much anything about Sam Wilson, and yeah, I think this is a major way of doing that. And I think his sister's a phenomenal actress. I loved their back and forth. I think that's gonna be fun to follow throughout.
Yeah, definitely. She was really great. And one of the major things that happens this episode in terms of Falcon's, you know, eventual transformation to Captain America that we are all assuming is coming, is he goes to a press conference to give up the shield, sort of be like, hey, I know it was like Steve's thing, like I don't want to take that. I think that it's important to like move on and all that stuff. And you can tell there was some hesitancy there. I thought that was a really good performance from Anthony Mackie, and he gave the shield to the Smithsonian. So also shout out to Rhodey in that scene. That was very cool.
Yeah, we get three side characters essentially in
Yeah.
Rhodey, Falcon, and the Winter Soldier, and they're all left without their the characters that they're meant in the movie to prop up. So sorry to interrupt you, but that is interesting that we do get to see all of them and presumably see where that goes with all three of them.
Yeah, and that sets up, where we eventually are going to go with the rest of this series, because the rest of the episode is, allowing for these characters to flesh out their personal lives. But not to jump around too much, at the end of the episode, the same, I'm assuming, senator who was at that Smithsonian presentation.
Yeah, he was like from the Department of Defense, I believe.
Sure, okay. Uh, he has his own press conference on the news at the end to introduce the new Captain America, which, again, I think is lining up with a lot of what you and I wanted to see. And got to shout out the TikTok creators. Straw Hat Goofy, he's like has like like a couple million followers on TikTok. He does a lot of movie stuff, but he was touching on the idea of Falcon and Winter Soldier living up to what you and I both wanted, of they're addressing racism, but he said it was like a very subtle way this episode, and I definitely picked up on it, but not to the extent that he was able to. The examples he shouted out was one that was specific that I did not fully grasp. In the bank scene,
Yeah.
which I am always uncomfortable with bank scenes in movies when they're talking about loans and like being like, sorry, you don't qualify.
Mm-hmm.
But Straw Hat Goofy was like, the fact that this banker initially thought was like, oh, you're an athlete? Is that how I know you?
Mm.
I was like, oh, I did not pick up on that. But like very subtle, but like peppering that there.
Yeah. What I got from that bank scene was the fact that that banker was like very enamored with Falcon, and then he was like, oh, like essentially he was like, thanks for doing all that, like you pretty much laid your life on the line.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were still denied the bank loan. And to me, like, I don't know if I'm reading into this, but to me, and this show is like exploring race, to me that reminded me of, or made me think of, African Americans like laying their life on the line for the United States in like World War I and World War II, and still coming home and facing discrimination.
Sure.
And like that, for me, that was just very interesting to see that correlation between those two ideas.
Yeah, and I think the idea of like having a banker who's like representing the elite being like, oh, I know you're an athlete, or also like the fact that he wanted selfies of just like the way that obviously racism in this country and everywhere exists on a bunch of different levels, but with specifically the elite and like sports team owners, how there's like all these allegories about how like owning a sports team is a sort of equivalent to racism and slavery in a lot of different ways, and like
using black athletes,
using black athletes for entertainment and like your whims, the way that guy was like, oh hey, take selfies with me, like I did not pick up on that, but hearing a creator shout that out, I was like, okay, so maybe they really are going to go for this, even if it's subtle, but I'd rather have it be subtle than non-existent.
Yeah, and his sister also says like, the banker says something like, yeah, everything's just been tightening recently, and she says, well, why does it always seem to be tightening around us?
Yeah, that too.
Like, yeah. So I'm glad that right now it's subtle. I think we'll probably have more overt examples of that going forward, but they are definitely laying the seeds in terms of that theme throughout.
Yeah, the other one that the creator pointed out was since it's the DoD guy, he at the beginning was like talking to Sam after the presentation. He's like, "Oh, that was the right call. You made the right choice. Nobody should take the mantle up." But then at the end, he's like, "Okay, here's my guy. Who is the white GI Joe looking dude." I think that maybe that guy, we could explore something with that down the line, but like you said, seeds being planted in episode 1, which makes me hopeful. So
yeah, totally. To me, this episode showed me that, like, with the idea of exploring Bucky's guilt and his grief and the subtle notions of racism that Sam experiences. I think this show is going to be. I think this has the potential to tell like a more compelling story than and more nuanced story than the MCU was known for pre Phase 4.
Hmm.
And well, of course they did have some with like Winter Soldier and stuff like that. But yeah, I think this has the possibility of being a mature show, and I think this episode sort of proved that.
For sure, yeah. There were a bunch of other things that happened this episode. We set up the plot of the antagonistic group that I'm sure is going to be the focus of the show until the shady government plot comes to light. But the Flag Smashers, I think, are people who are devoted to the idea that kind of Thanos was right and they want the world to be the way it was during the blip of no borders, a unification, which I remember when you and I and Pat did our Endgame discussion, that was an idea that we were like, hey, I'd love to see them explore the people that are like, oh no, this was better during this, and we're getting that now.
Yeah, just in general, I like how this show is like unlike WandaVision, which was very hyper specific. I like how this is like a much broader like MCU, what's happening in the universe type of project, and yeah, that's one of those where when you described it that way, it's like that's like an interesting, very specific MCU idea for a villain group to take. It's like no, everything for them. It was like no, everything was better back then. They were like what like it was. They were definitely on r/Thanos was right, where like there are more resources for the people that are here, and there are fewer problems because there are fewer humans to be messing up the Earth with. And now, after 5 years, it's reverted back to that original state, and those problems associated with that have returned. So that is really interesting. I don't know if it'll end up being super nuanced and like noteworthy in the end of it, but at least at first, the idea of it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's cool to see them exploring that. The masked guy that had like the super kick, is that uh do you have a prediction or anything
Uh,
like that? Because I
they
might.
were like he was talking. Sam was talking with Torres, like the army dude, about that, and he was cut off before he could say anything. But I think the implication was that he's like a super powered being, like he's an enhanced being. Um, I don't know if I think it's anyone in particular. Do you have an idea of who it could be?
I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they tee it up so that the guy who's U.S. agent
Mm,
might be working with them or something. Like, that's not the avenue I want them to go with, the government's guy, but I wouldn't be surprised because I definitely got the vibe of like, oh, it's a super soldier, or like they have the serum, or somebody replicated the serum, and maybe that's what's going on here. But yeah, I think there's a possibility that we could explore either of those.
interesting. I knew instantly. I was like, "That's not Zemo," because
Yeah, yeah.
it's a big dude behind that mask. Yeah, I know he had longer hair, and I don't think we got to see the the new Captain America's like hair because it was covered in a helmet. But if we do get that reveal and he's got those long locks, you might be on something, Christian.
Yeah, or the hair was part of the mask for some
Mm.
real, spy stuff.
Yeah, sure, sure.
uh, were there any other notable parts of the episode you want to go over? Because as much as I really liked what we saw here today, I do think it was pretty straightforward with the discussion points, right? Obviously, there's a lot of character exploration here, but other than that, I can't think of much else that stood out to me.
I guess nothing. We didn't really talk too much about the action scene at the beginning, right? Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So, returning Captain America villain, Batroc from The Winter Soldier, the French guy,
Yeah. I
he got
saw.
out.
Yeah, I guess so. I saw a lot of people talk about the idea that it's like I think Eric Goldman from Fandom was talking about this. The idea that they're treating the MCU now more like Marvel Comics, where villains like sub villains can just sort of return,
Yeah.
just to fill in that villain role, and then just come back here and there because they're not all that important. So that was cool, and it was a little bit of consistency from Winter Soldier, in keeping it in like the Cap family of villains. So that's pretty nice addition.
Yeah, I really like that a lot because I agree. I think that's something that they should do more often with some of those lower tier villains. Obviously, we know like Zemo's coming back, and Zemo's kind of a big bad, but yeah, I thought it was a good action set piece, right? Like going through the ravine,
Canyon.
the
Mm-hmm.
canyon. Yeah, that was fun. It was cool to see Falcon have his own unique sort of set piece where uh, you could compare it to like an Iron Man action set piece, but I think it's more interesting here because he's balancing like when the wings should be out, when they shouldn't be, using momentum the way like a Batman would. But
Yeah, sense of kinetic energy going on.
yeah, it's a bit more engaging, I think, than just watching Tony Stark fly around. So I
Yeah,
appreciate it on that level, even though they're kind of going for a similar thing.
and Red Wing's back. His little drone.
Yeah, that's very cool.
That's fun. Yeah, totally.
So yeah, and it was a well done action set piece, right? There were stakes there. The show I think has introduced stakes well enough so far, right? Obviously, in the coming weeks, we're going to see this conspiracy about the Flag Smashers open up. Uh, some conflict, presumably next week, with Sam dealing with his choice and what the government's doing, and then we gotta have these characters meet up. We gotta introduce Zemo. We gotta introduce Sharon. Like, there's all these things going on that we have to tie up because there's only 5 episodes left in this one. So, I guess that was my other point I wanted to bring up. I'm glad that they're expanding the runtime for this show.
Yeah, because this was like 50-ish minutes, right?
Yeah, and I think if you take credits out, it was probably like a 40-minute episode. So like, I'm glad. You're right. Like WandaVision, I think worked well with its format, but here I didn't feel like we were dragging or anything. So I appreciate the expanded time.
Yeah, I imagine this will probably be the traditional like MCU TV production schedule where it's like however many episodes and they're probably like 40 to 50 minutes because WandaVision was very experimental. I don't think that's the norm. I think this is probably the new norm for like the Hawkeye TV show, for example.
Yeah, and like maybe Loki also. We don't know, but um, yeah, I'm glad that they're allowed that here. So, um, I guess any final thoughts on the episode before we sign off? Do you want to throw a prediction out there for next week's episode, or what's up?
I think next week we will probably see uh, Falcon and the Winter Soldier together. Um, I think that announcement will probably have them both because they both have that connective tissue of Captain America, and the therapist was mentioning that um, Bucky wasn't answering any of Sam's texts. So I
Mm-hmm.
imagine that when Bucky sees that, that's the first person he goes, probably the only person he can go to, really. Um, so yeah, I think we do see them
Yeah,
next.
I think we're probably going to get some conflict between them. Like Bucky, obviously, kind of being pissed. It's like, why'd you give that up? That's what he wanted. So curious to see how they deal with that together, as well as I think one thing we didn't touch on is that the fact that Bucky's been pardoned and he's a civilian now. He's obviously going to get pulled back into the game. So like wondering how they tee that up, but yeah, I'm looking forward to next week's episode. In a lot of ways, I feel like this one kind of felt like a prologue, but
Mm.
not in like any detrimental way. But I really liked this first episode for sure.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
What is the state of and neither of us know this, but I just want to pose this question. What do you think the state of the Avengers is right now? Because obviously Iron Man's dead, Captain America's old and retired, maybe dead, who knows? Like, has it fallen on the shoulders of like someone like Doctor Strange or someone like Carol Danvers, or like what does that organization even look like right now?
That's a good question. Because out of the core team, right, by like the time of Infinity, like I wouldn't consider Doctor Strange a capital A Avenger the way I don't consider Spider Man one, but
Sure.
like War Machine, Falcon, Uh, I would have said Wanda until she ran off.
Yeah. Yeah, right? That had me thinking too, because she's probably no longer, and Vision's gone too. Like everyone's
Yeah.
just very, very separated at this point, or doing their own thing.
Yeah, and you'd assume that Carol's back out in space, right?
Yeah. Same with Thor.
Yeah, so it's like it's Rhodey. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Rhodey. If Rhodey's the one that's like kind of calling the shots right now, or at least spearheading it, because I don't think Scott would be around or anybody else. And you're trying to think of who would be on that military call the way that the UN wants the Avengers to be. Like at least in Infinity War, Rhodey was like sort of, kind of
The
side by
liaison.
side with Tony to be in there. Yeah, like you said, liaison. So yeah, maybe it is Rhodey. Maybe Rhodey's the one.
Yeah. Also, there's also the possibility of, if everyone's just like, do we even need the Avengers right now? Obviously, like they do, but like they might be in that period where it's like, what is that? What does the Avengers even look like without Tony Stark and Captain America right now? Like, is it all smaller groups at this point? Is it all we're doing things separately, and the Avengers face so many issues trying to be a collective team that like we have to re-examine what that looks like. So I think this show might tackle like what that looks like, maybe, because I do want to know what that the idea of the Avengers means post Endgame.
Yeah, I wonder. I think there's also Banner, so I wonder if like Banner's
Right.
maybe if like Rhodey's the one who's in charge, like recruiting, and then Banner's like, I'm your science guy. That could be fun. That could be cool.
Yeah, totally.
But
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
I'm interested to see where it goes. So we'll see where we pick up next week. But until then, Jack, where can the agents of Excelsior find you?
sure. You can follow me on social media at Fascinated Jack. Christian and I are finishing up our run through of Pokemon Emerald for my first Mon, so you can follow that show on podcast services and youtube.com/joyclicks. What about you, Christian?
You can follow me on Twitter, Twitch, and TikTok at Chun2D2. Right here as well on youtube.com/joyclicks. If you want the video version of this show, you can also see all of our other podcasts, like Jack mentioned, including My First Mon, our Pokemon show, and Long Play Club, where we're going through Metal Gear Solid. If you want to get the audio version of this show, however, it is available on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, anywhere podcasts are available. If you want to review the show, if you enjoyed it, it would be greatly appreciated if you did, because 5 stars just takes a quick second and it helps us out a ton. And if you want to get involved further, patreon.com/joyclicks is where you can go to support the shows at the $1 and $5 tiers. $5 tier gets you producer credit on all of our podcasts, like Chris Sakas and Aaron Easton. But thank you very much. That's going to do it for this week. We got a lot of Avengers content. The MCU is steamrolling ahead, so we will be back next week with even more and another episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Fat dubs, but until then, Excelsior.
Excelsior.